today's lesson, we're going to go over 6.4 dividing polynomials. We're going to take a look at how we can divide multiple polynomials by either monomials or binomials or trinomials. So in this first example, we're going to take this trinomial, 16y cubed minus 8y squared plus 6y, and divide it by 2y. And what we're going to do is we're just going to set it up as a normal fraction for right now. And what we're going to do, since this is a monomial, and this is important, just one term, not a binomial, is that we're going to take the monomial and we're going to divide it into each of the terms. So it's really 16y cubed divided by 2y. And that will give you 8y squared. Then I'm going to do negative 8y squared divided by 2y, which is minus 4y. And then finally the last term, 6y divided by 2y, which is then going to be 3. Take a minute and write down number 2 and pause the video and see if you can do number 2 by yourselves. Again, what we're going to do is we're going to take the monomial and divide it into each one of the terms. You'll notice there are 4 terms in this division problem. So the first one will become 9ab squared. Remember, you subtract the exponents. Minus 6. Those a's cancel out. And then I'm just left with a b. Then I'll divide the third term. You'll notice that the a squares cancel out and the b's. So we're left with nothing, but instead of just canceling it out completely, we'll write it as plus 1. And then finally, you'll notice that I have negative 4a over a squared over b. Now, the higher terms are in the denominator, so we can't reduce this into just a regular number, but we will reduce the variables. So a over a squared reduces, so it's going to be left with 4 over ab. And then that will be our final answer. Now let's go back to grade school for a second, and I want you to take 24,328 and divide it by 11, and think about the process in which you would do this. First, you would take your division bar and you would put 24,328 underneath, and you would take the 11 on the outside. And what you would do is you would first divide. You would see how many times 24 or 11 can go into 24, which happens to be twice. It does have a remainder, but we'll ignore that for a second. So we put the 2 up here, and after that you're going to multiply. You multiply the 11 times 2, and that gives you 22. And you put the 22 underneath the 24. And then finally what you're going to do is you're going to subtract, and you get 2. And from there, you drop down the 3, and you kind of start this process over again. You divide 23 by 11, which is 2. You multiply the 2 times 11 again, which is 22. You subtract, you get 1, and you drop down the 2. And then you go through this process again. I divide 12 by 11, I get 1. I multiply 1 times 11. I subtract, and I drop down 1 last time. I get 8, goes in 1 time, multiply, and subtract. Now, 11 doesn't go into 7, so this is called the remainder. And if you remember, one way that you can write this is you can rewrite it as 7 11ths. Now, what we're going to do in the next couple examples is we're going to divide by binomials. Okay, this is much different than monomials, so make sure you remember that. Monomials you can divide into each term. Binomials you'll have to actually do long division. And we're going to do 3 steps. We're going to divide, multiply, subtract. So what we have is 6x squared plus 11x minus 2 divided by x plus 2. We're going to set it up like normal long division. And we put the x plus 2 on the outside, 6x squared plus 11x minus 2 underneath. And I'm going to go through those steps. I'm going to divide. And when I divide, though, it's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to divide 6x squared divided by the first term, which is x. So I take the first terms of these. And we get 6x squared divided by x, and what's left over is 6x. Remember what we do with that. We take that and it goes on top, so we get 6x right there. From there, we take that number and multiply it on the side. So I'm going to multiply 6x times x plus 2. That's going to give me 6x squared plus 12x. And that goes underneath. And the last step is to subtract. And we're going to show that just over here. But when I subtract, I have to make sure you subtract the quantity. What will always happen when you're doing this is that the first terms will cancel out. If they don't, you know you did something wrong and you want to go back. So 6x squared minus 6x squared cancels out. 11x minus 12x is negative 1x. And then we repeat the process. I drop down the negative 2, and I go to division again. I will divide negative 1x by x, and I'm left with negative 1. The negative 1 goes on top, and then what we're going to do is we're going to multiply. We'll multiply the negative 1 times the x plus 2, and I get negative x minus 2, and that goes down here. And then finally what we're going to do is we're going to subtract. And again, if I subtract the entire thing, the first term cancels out. And in this case, we look out and we get negative 2 minus negative 2. That cancels out, and our remainder is 0. So our final answer when we divide is 6x minus 1. Last problem for today. We have 3x to the 4th plus 4x squared minus 6x plus 1 divided by x squared plus 1. We'll set this up the same way, but there is one thing that you should notice. It goes from x to the 4th to x squared. You'll notice it's missing a degree, as is going from x squared to x. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in what I call placeholders. I'm going to put in 0x cubed to represent that degree of 3. And then everything else follows the same. Now, you would do the same thing if a x squared or an x was missing as well. I'm going to do the same thing on the outside, x squared plus 0x, and then plus 1. And again, what we're going to do is we're going to go through that same process of divide, multiply, and subtract. So my division step is to take the 3x to the 4th and divide it by x squared. Again, you're always taking those first terms. You're going to end up getting 3x squared, and that goes on top. And then you're going to multiply. You're going to multiply 3x squared by x squared plus 0x plus 1, and you get 3x to the 4th plus 0x cubed plus 3x squared, and that goes underneath. And then we'll subtract. Again, this first term should cancel out. 0 minus 0 cancels out, and 4 minus 3 will just be 1x squared. And then I'll drop down the negative 6x. And then I'm going to repeat the process. we're going to divide x squared divided by x squared. That's going to give you 1. And we put the plus 1 up here. And we multiply 1 times x squared plus 0x plus 1. And we're going to get x squared plus 0x plus 1. You'll notice I'll need to drop 2 down for it to cancel out. And finally, we're going to subtract. So when I subtract, this first term will cancel out, and negative 6 minus 0 will still be negative 6x, and the 1's will cancel out. Now, if I try to repeat this process to do the division step, negative 6x over x squared can't go into x. So this right here is called our remainder. And just like we did previously in the long division, it gets put over our divisor. So it's going to be plus a negative 6x over x squared plus 1. Of course, you could put the negative over here and make that positive. That's fine. But then this up here would be my final answer.